Good morning, guys. Welcome to the Sunday gathering. It's so good to have you guys in the chat. Thank you for joining today and being a part of what we're doing. It's good to see all you guys. I'll just call your names out. I've seen Flat Bob. It's good to have you. I hope that your family is doing well after your loss this past couple weeks. I think everyone's continuing to pray for you. Jane, it's good to see you. Deborah, also with you and your family situation with Austin, we have lifted many prayers. I just want you to know that. It's good to see you this morning. Squiffy, it is good to have you this morning. I'm so happy to see you in the chat. I'm glad you could join us. And we got Allison, we've got Chrissy, Red Raven, Stacia, good to see you guys. Who else we got? We got Rick way up there. If I miss you, forgive me, but I see Alvin. Yes, you can wind me up if you want to try. I'll try to stay calm. I always will try. Who else we got? We got a lot of you guys this morning. It's good to have you. Gerald, it's good to see you. I think it's been a while since I've seen you. It's good to have you. West Wind, good morning. And who else? Yeah, I'm doing it different. I think I'm going to try doing without the chat on the screen for a little while and see how that goes. I have some other ideas for the chat in the near future. So that may change soon. Be aware that the reason I'm saying that is because I am almost finished, within weeks of being finished, with the Bible Scribe mobile app. I think, and I'm still percolating the ideas, but I think that I will prefer, once we have the Bible Scribe app, for people to do the live commentary on their phones. It of course will be good for people who are sitting in their living room watching their TV, or regardless, even if you're on your phone and you're watching the live, you could flip over to the Bible Scribe app to comment real quick. If you're on a desktop computer like me, you could obviously have both open. So anyway, there's a lot we can do with that if we actually can all work together on the same application platform instead of, we've got YouTube. We've also got, probably this morning, we'll have a few dozen people on Rumble that, of course, aren't communicating with us at all. So, there's a lot of things to be said for this. We can combine everybody on one platform. We can avoid all censorship. So there will be no censorship if I can handle your chat, your communication. It can be 100% private. See, that's the other thing. All the privacy stuff, having to worry about whether YouTube is actually going to keep your stuff private or censor you or deliver your information to the FBI or whatever it is, all that goes away when I can get you guys on my platform. So anyway, that's some of the things I'm thinking about. I just want you to know that. That's why I'm trying to change things up a little bit. I had a few people actually recently that said they didn't want, they would rather not have the commenting on screen. It does, of course, take up some space on the screen, so there's that. Anyway, I'm just telling you, there's a lot of ideas coming. The Bible Scribe app that I have built so far has the Bible lookup stuff from the Bible Scribe app, the normal app. So it's got the writings. You can use all the same writings. If you have a membership, you see all the writings. If you don't, you see a portion, just like you do on the Bible Scribe app website. And of course, that's like right here. So yeah, the Bible Scribe app that I'm going to be using this morning, it uses the same engine as this. So the app on the phone will have where you can read any of these writings. It might have, news postings that I post that are related to Christianity or the Bible or things we're studying. It probably will also, my prototype already has a discussion area where you can either talk to me directly or you could start a discussion group. Some of you have been saying you wanted a Discord channel. Well, Discord just implemented all this stuff for privacy that makes you have to do biometric scanning when you actually use their app now. So it's either going to do a facial recognition on you or cause you to have to do I guess if you have a thumb reader or some kind of, some kind of security system that's going to be above and beyond your privacy, what you want for your privacy. So I can take all that and switch it around on them, and we will have it on the app so that we could start forums on different topics there and talk. You could chat with your friends here. Again, you could chat with people directly, like in a private conversation. So I can do all of these things. In fact, most of that's already built. So I'm just saying there's a lot of options available to us, and I'm trying to make sure that when I get that app ready for everybody, that it actually does all the things we need it to do as a church group, as a Christian body, and keeps us very private, So I want all of those things to happen. And Linda, if you don't do computers well, I don't think you should worry about that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that if people still use YouTube for the comments, I'm still going to see it, okay? I'm going to make sure that all that kind of happens. But, again, I'll just say that, the tool sets that I have available to me now with AI to do some of this stuff, it's stuff that I wanted to do before, but, of course would have taken me months, years to get it all finished. Now it happens in hours or minutes. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. And I'm trying to get that ready. I don't want to release it prematurely to where it's just not helpful for you guys. But anyway, there's going to be a lot there. So I'm hoping that I can get that done. Yeah, Christina, you said that you like the comments on the screen because if you miss, then you can watch the replay and you have the context. Yeah, so that's what I think is problematic. So I want to get back to having the comments on the screen, but I want to do it on my terms, not YouTube's terms. So that's what I'm kind of trying to say here. And I think it'll happen actually within, if I had to say, I think it'll be within the next couple weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks here, that I get the app finished and launched on the app stores. So we will try to do that. I think that the app is going to be free, or maybe just a small price to help offset the cost and the time I've spent in that thing. Maybe a few dollars, not much. Just so, it helps me a little bit, but it will work similarly to the Bible Scribe app that's online, where if you actually do the $10 a month, it opens all the writings on the phone for you too. So there's going to be that kind of a thing, I think. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see how it goes and what I, decide to do with all of it. But I think it'll be some good tool sets for us. I think it'll be good tools. All right, well, enough of that. It's great to have you guys this morning. Why don't I will go ahead and play my welcome message for anyone who sees this new this week. So let me go ahead and do that. And while it's running, remember that it's about 3.5 minutes. You have time to hit the restroom, get a coffee, and then we'll be back here and we will start reading. After our prayer time, we'll start reading in Hebrews chapters 8 and 9. Thanks, guys. Welcome to the Bible Scribe channel. My name is David, and let me briefly introduce the Bible Scribe ministry. I grew up in the Protestant church, but left it in 2019 mainly because of disagreements with some of their doctrines, particularly the doctrine of tithe I find incorrect according to scriptures, and frankly disturbing. I taught in the churches for a long time, but I started this YouTube channel in 2018 as an extension of my ministry in teaching the Bible to people around the world. Today I've produced over 500 videos with research that is focused on the Bible first, ancient writings second, and then a variety of other topics. One of the most important things I do is the Sunday live stream, which is an online church in every sense of the word. It is called the Sunday Gathering. We connect, discuss, and pray for one another on a weekly basis. And we also tackle some of the biggest topics of the day and find out what the scriptures and the other ancient texts say about them. Everyone is invited and welcome to join us on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 9:30 a.m. Central, and 7:30 a.m. Pacific. You can easily use my website at bible-scribe.com to access all of these videos and much more. There are also more than 50 research articles on different topics, from flat earth to early church fathers to holistic cancer treatments and prevention. In addition to the website, I have developed a Bible research application, the Bible Scribe app, to study and research the Bible and more than 50 other ancient writings. This app is available to the public with limited access, but requires a membership for access to all of the writings and the features that it offers. Many people have asked how they can support the work I am doing, and that is done by purchasing a membership on the Bible Scribe app through my Give, Send, Go campaign. It is at givesendgo.com/BibleScribe. For every $10 you pay, you will get a month membership on the Bible Scribe app. It is completely up to you as to whether or not you use this membership, and you can set this up as a monthly payment or as a lump sum, and your membership will be applied or extended accordingly. Payments can also be taken on YouTube through supers, gifts, or memberships to the channel. But please know that I offer all the video content, the website, the Sunday church gathering live streams, free and without expectation of any financial support. There is no tithe required by God according to the Bible, nor do I require any form of tithe or financial support for participation in our live streams or access to all of my videos and website online. So thank you for visiting the Bible Scribe channel and ministry, and may God bless you in your research and your journey to grow closer to Him. All right. Well, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to show all that. Russell, it's good to have you this morning. Glad to see you, brother. Flat Bob, yes, please share the links. I think you saw my chat there, but I wanted you guys to know, I'll mention it, that Flat Bob is going to share links for anyone that wants to help financially with his brother's funeral costs. Those of you that don't know, his brother passed away just recently, and we've been praying for Flat Bob and his father, the family. And so I think this is an incredible opportunity for any of you guys that want to help out someone in our church body, because that's what this is. So please, Flat Bob, post the links. I will also take note of those links. So let me do that too real quick. Okay, here we go. I'm taking those down too, because I think this would be an incredible way for us to help you, Flat Bob, in a real way. I'm so glad that you've mentioned it, actually. It looks like you've posted donation places for both PayPal and for Cash App. Whoever's got either one or both, pick the one you like best. I'd love to be able to help you too, Flat Bob, so let's do that. Thank you, church family. All right, well, let's do our prayer real quick before we get going. Then we'll get into the book of Hebrews again. I'm excited about that. And then we will do these topics. I just so you know, I've got 4 topics right now from Chrissy, Linda, Patriot, and Flat Bob. Oh, no, Flat Bob, never mind. That's another note that I had about the email you sent. So I have 3 topics. So there's room for maybe one or two more. So please, if you have a topic you do want to talk about, please put it in the chat and let me know, and we'll stick it on the end here. All right. Well, let me bow my head real quickly, guys. And please, if you do have other prayer requests as I'm praying here, please put them in the chat. We'll try to scoop them up and get them to our body, church body, our prayer group, so that we can pray throughout the week on those. But bow with me if you would like to. Thank you. Lord God, I do thank you this morning for the opportunity to be here with such fine people, such good people that are doing the same thing as me, searching for you, searching for truth, trying to be closer to you every day. Thank you for that opportunity to do that together this morning. Please bless us in terms of what we study, what we look at, the truths that we uncover. I just give that all to you protect us all as we are on this, and throughout the week, those that watch this and join in with us after the fact. Lord, please bless each and every one in the same ways. Just guide us with your Holy Spirit. We thank you and give you all the glory and all the honor. It's in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, the King, that we pray. Amen. All right. Thank you, guys. Oh, Flat Bob, don't dog yourself. We are going to give what we think the Lord is telling us to give. That's what we're going to do. So just sit back and watch God work. That's what we should be doing right now. West Wind, I got your question, so that's a good one. I like that. We'll do that one today. And let's see what else. Anything else? Want to make sure I get it all. If you guys had any requests. Okay. Christina, you asked about the current things with the Epstein Files. I can mention that. I'll probably do it at the end, Christina. I'll just mention what I'm seeing. Probably the same thing you guys are seeing, but I'll mention it. Okay. Jane, you asked about my thoughts on C.S. Lewis. You always loved his books, but reading as an adult made me rethink his theology. Was he a believer or an occultist? That's an interesting topic, Jane. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I think we should definitely talk about that. I'm excited to talk about that. Okay. All right. Well, let's get on then to our Bible reading today. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 8. Put that on the screen and get ready here. So I'll zoom this up for you guys so you can see it. And we will start going through. Now, if you remember what we've done so far in the book of Hebrews, we have talked mostly about Jesus Christ, if you remember. But it's in the context of what these Jews would be thinking in their heads. So it's all been about how worthy and how perfect of a high priest Jesus Christ is. So it's trying to, Paul, the author here, is trying to replace in the minds of these Jews their ideas of the Mosaic covenant, the ideas of the priesthood and what that meant, and the temple and the Holy of Holies, and replace these ideas with the true things. We're going to see this talked about even in these chapters 8 and 9. Replace their very materialistic system of theology. He's going to replace that with a spiritual system of theology based on Christ. And essentially, he's going to be telling them Christ was the foundation of all those things. It was never about the material. It was really about Christ and the spiritual things in heaven. So that's the basis of where we are. We just went through in chapters 6 and 7, we talked about the priest Melchizedek being the first priest. And I think as you saw, what we talked about was that generally it was understood this was a normal human priest, but had an interesting kind of legacy background that, was quite supernatural in a way. But anyway, that Melchizedek was the true first priesthood, first line of the priesthood, and that carried all the way through to Jesus Christ. And of course, he made the points that carried from before the Mosaic law until even after the Mosaic law because of Christ. So that's kind of where we are in background. Let's go ahead and get started in Hebrews chapter 8 this morning. Reading in verse 1. Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the summation. This is the summary, he says, of what we've talked about prior. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of majesty in the heavens. Now, he's talking about our King, our Savior, Jesus Christ here. We have to listen closely to this. He's our high priest. He's set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens. Now, that statement right there is key because most dispensationalists, they don't really think that Jesus has taken the throne of David yet. I mean, they're very confused about that whole thing. They think that there will be some third temple with a throne built in it, and that Jesus will then sit on that here on earth. We've got now both Paul here, if the author here is truly Paul, and we've got Peter in Acts chapter 2, both saying, hey, Jesus is already on the throne, right beside God. And we know if it's the throne on the right hand of God, that it's the same throne that David talked about. It's the throne of David, because he said, the Lord said to my Lord, sit thou at my right hand. And that was David's throne. So we know this had already taken place. Christ, as of his ascension, has sat on the throne next to God and is the king, the authority that God had placed above every other thing except himself, okay, according to 1 Corinthians 15. Now, verse 2, Christ also a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched and not man. What is he talking about here? Which tabernacle or sanctuary did God set up? Well, he's of course talking about heaven. He's talking about the throne of God in heaven. No man set that up. You know, he can't possibly be talking about the temple on earth, which is what the Jews believe. You know, even modern, quote, Jews. That's not what he's talking about here. It is all about heaven. God pitched that tent in heaven. And that is the sanctuary or the temple for which Christ is the minister, Jesus Christ. Verse 3, for every high priest is ordained to offer gifts and sacrifices. Wherefore it is of necessity that this man has somewhat also to offer. So it's saying that priests offer the sacrifices, so obviously Christ has offered a sacrifice. Verse 4, if he were here on earth, he would not be a priest, seeing that there are priests that offer gifts according to the law. Now we're getting into the law, the Mosaic law. Again, this is for these Jews to soak this in and realize there is a difference between the Mosaic law and what Christ has done. It's starting in this passage now to separate the two. He's saying if Christ was a priest on earth, he would not be a priest. I mean, if he was still on earth, because priests offer gifts according to the Mosaic law. Okay, he's saying that's not what Christ is going to do. Verse 5, who serve unto the example and shadow of heavenly things. We got to go slow here because we have to understand what is being said. The human priests, they serve and they minister to an example or the shadow of the heavenly things. So we've already talked about prior in this book of Hebrews that the temple was a shadow of what's in heaven. It was set up that way, and we're going to talk more about that in this particular chapter. But he's saying these human priests, they were doing all their acts of service and sacrifices and going into this temple, but it was all an example of what's in heaven. It was a shadow. As it says, Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. He was about to build the tent of meeting and then the tabernacle, etc. Well, God told him, it says, see, said he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. The pattern that was showed to Moses in the Mount Sinai, the pattern of the temple, the tabernacle that they were to set up in the wilderness. The pattern was of the heavenly things. It was not ever about the earthly things. That was the whole reason they did it, was to symbolize what's in heaven. Verse 6, now he has obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is a mediator of a better covenant. Now it's talking about Christ here. Christ has obtained a more excellent ministry than Moses. Now this would make many Jews very angry to hear if they weren't following what was being said, that Jesus is now the perfect priest, whereas Moses was a human, flawed priest. Now Christ has obtained a more excellent ministry by how much also he is the mediator of what? A better covenant. Better than what? Obviously, better than the Mosaic law and covenant. By the way, the word covenant, again, I reiterate this because people think it means more than it means. It means an agreement. Okay, we would say actually the word agreement. Every place where the Greek says covenant, we could say agreement. You could also use the word contract, depending on the context, right? Because they're all the same. But this better covenant of Christ was established on better promises than the Mosaic law. Okay? Better promises. It's going to continue and explain this to us. Verse 7. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them. No, now, I just want to say in that one verse, let's acknowledge that this says there are two different ones. And the first one it's talking about, obviously the Mosaic, was not perfect. It was had faults. Okay? Verse 8, for finding fault with them, he says, behold, the days will come, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they continued not in that covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. So we remember back, he's saying there's a new covenant going to be made with Israel and Judah. And it's not the one that was made originally. It's not the Mosaic, because he says they obviously didn't keep it, right? They obviously did not. They continued not in my covenant. I regarded them not, saith the Lord. There were times when the Lord removed his hand from them, removed his support and protection because he needed them to understand. So we see that, and it's, obviously what happened there. As they came out of Egypt, they strayed away in the wilderness many times. They wouldn't eat the manna correctly. They would, he had to send snakes into the camp to bite them and correct them because they were off the track. All right, verse 10. For this is the covenant or agreement that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. What is he going to do? I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their hearts. I will be to them a God, they will be to me a people. And now, again, I will go back to something someone else once told me when they were arguing against me about Mosaic law. The word laws means instructions. No matter what you want it to mean, it means the word instructions, whether they're written down or they're commandments. So what the Lord is saying, I'm going to put my instructions into your minds and write them on your hearts. It's not going to be this Mosaic thing that's been going on with Israel for so long. It's also going to tell us why this is in just a second. I will be to them a God, they will be to me a people, and they will not teach. Now this is key in verse 11. They will not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. For all shall know me from the least to the greatest. Now, why is he saying this? The reason he's saying this is it makes it clear in this verse that that's what Jews were supposed to be doing the whole time. When they were under Mosaic law, when the Israelites were going around to the different nations, when they were supposedly being led by God, they were supposed to teach other peoples, know the Lord. They were supposed to tell them about God by doing their practices. This was the point of Israel and the Mosaic law. He's saying they're not going to need to do that anymore because why? All shall know me, from the least to the greatest. All nations, everybody. So it's not going to help for them anymore to go around proclaiming the Lord. They don't have to. We all, because of Jesus Christ, this is the most monumental thing about Christianity that most people miss. When Christ came and the church started spreading, the whole world changed. The whole world. There's no longer, according to God, there's no longer any excuse for people to not know who God is. Because of all he did with Israel, you could extend that then to what he did with Christ and what he did with Jerusalem in 70 AD, and then the church spreading throughout the world. There is no excuse now for nations, Gentiles, to not understand who God is. So this covenant between Israel and God is talking about that they're not going to need to teach people anymore about him because everyone will know. Verse 12, for I will be merciful to their unrighteousness. Now he's talking about Gentiles. I'm going to be merciful to their unrighteousness. These, goyim, essentially. I mean, that's what the word is for all the nations besides the Jews. Now, of course, that's turned into a racial slur now. We won't get into all that. But this is saying, I'm going to be merciful even to the Gentiles because of their unrighteousness, and for their sins and iniquities, I will remember them no more. In that he says, a new covenant has made the first one old. So the Mosaic law here is called old. Then he says, that which decays, the Mosaic law, and waxes old is what? It's ready to vanish away. Now, for those who think that Mosaic law is still in force, they have a real problem with this verse and probably really with everything we just read. That which decays, the old covenant, which he just mentioned in this verse, it's about to vanish. Now, what might you think might be the vanishing of the law, of the Mosaic law? What exact, kind of events come to mind? Well, for me, the events that come to mind, especially if Hebrews was written in the mid-1st century, which is what I believe is true. I believe this was written in the mid-1st century. I believe he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. I mean, if he's not talking about that, it has to be the corruption of the priesthood, which happened in that same time frame right before all that. So what we're seeing here is that even the writer of Hebrews, let's assume it's Paul, knew this was coming, knew all of this in some way, and was able to foresee that God was going to take care of all of that and make it very clear. And I believe that is 70 AD that made it so clear. I mean, for God to allow the temple to be razed to the ground and burned, I mean, that's a big deal. Like, there were other times in history, obviously, that the temple was ransacked and burned at times when Babylon came in and other things happened, but this was pretty final. This was really final. Essentially, the priesthood was burned alive in that temple that day. I mean, there's not much more that could happen to make it positive that, man, that whole system really was bankrupt. It was gone. There's no more Mosaic law system. It's gone. It burned to the ground. And it's because of the new covenant that was coming along, the new agreement. It's not necessarily like, I don't know. So I don't subscribe, by the way, to covenantal eschatology other than what is said. There's a new agreement. So what's the new agreement? We're going to learn more in the next chapter. All right. So let me switch over. We'll go into Hebrews 9. So chapter 9, verse 1, then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine service. Okay, he's going to continue on this dichotomy between what was in the Mosaic law and now what is in Christ, what it is, what's the agreements, what's the difference. A worldly sanctuary. The first covenant had the ordinances of the service and the worldly sanctuary, okay, that, as we just said, was destroyed a few years later from this writing, as he kind of hinted here. Verse 2, for there was a tabernacle made, the first, wherein was the candlestick and the table, the showbread. It was called the sanctuary. And after the second veil, the tabernacle, which is called the holiest of all. Remember what it said before, that these were examples or shadows of what's in heaven at God's throne. And that's why they were made the way they were, was to forecast it, to foreshadow it. Verse 4, which had the golden censer, the ark of the covenant in the Holy of Holies, laid round about with gold, wherein was the golden pot with the manna, and Aaron's rod that had budded, and the tables of the covenant. And over it the cherubims of glory, shadowing the mercy seat, of which we cannot now speak particularly. Now, just be mindful that everything we're reading is a picture of heaven. Because what happens around the throne of God in heaven? Well, the cherubim sit there. And they're the cherubim with I can't remember, is it like 3 pair of wings and 4 faces? And they turn every which way. And they actually, the cherubims, from what some of the writings say, is they are so powerful and they sometimes will turn inward toward each other, just as we see on the Ark of the Covenant, that the cherubim were turned towards each other. And that there are other angels around the throne of God that keep the cherubim in check, because if they face each other too long, they will attack one another. I mean, there are writings that literally say this, and it's kind of displayed for us in terms of how we know that the descriptions of the Ark of the Covenant show us they were turned towards each other, because it was a danger, and there are other angels there to keep them turned away from each other so they do not destroy each other. It's just an interesting little tidbit that we learn when we read all these different writings, little insights like that. Verse 5, over the covenant, Ark of the Covenant, the cherubims of glory shadowing the mercy seat. Verse 6, when these things were thus ordained at first with Moses and the tabernacle in the wilderness, the priests always went to the first tabernacle. They accomplished the service of God. But into the second, the Holy of Holies, went the high priest alone, once per year, with blood, which he offered the blood for himself and then for the people, right? Because he was human too. He needed the coverage of the blood. Verse 8, the Holy Ghost now signifying that the way into the holiest of holies was not yet made clear. It wasn't made clear for all humanity how to get to the throne of God. While as the first tabernacle was yet standing, they didn't understand all of that. They knew it was an image of things in heaven. They should have known that. But he's saying it wasn't fully manifest to them. They didn't fully understand this. Verse 9, it was a figure for the time, at that time, okay, then present. That it was a figure for them, a symbol for that time, so they understood some things, in which were offered both gifts and sacrifices that could not make him that did the service perfect as pertaining to the conscience. So it's saying even for the high priest that went into the Holy of Holies, all the things he did in there, they didn't make him perfect in any way, okay, like complete. They didn't actually do, he was not this perfect priest that Christ is what it's going to make that comparison in just a second. The high priest, the human high priest, it says in verse 10, stood only in meats and drinks and diverse washings, the cleansing rituals with the water in front of the tabernacle, and carnal ordinances, materialistic ordinances, imposed on them until what? The time of Reformation. Wow. So realize it's now calling the shift from Mosaic law to Christ a reformation for Israel, a reformation of them. Verse 11, but Christ, having come as a high priest of good things to come. Now, he's talking now to them as if they are Christians. We should listen with our Christian ears to what is being said now. Christ being come a high priest of good things to come for all of us, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of the building, neither by the blood of goats and calves. So the perfectness of Christ has nothing to do with any building. It has nothing to do with sacrificial, real, not real, but materialistic things like bloods of goats and calves. All those sacrifices. His perfect priesthood, doesn't have anything to do with those things. Now, it's really trying to point them at that he was the foundation of those things. He was the reason those things were done. You'll see it in just a second. But by his own blood, he entered once into the holiest of holies, having obtained eternal redemption for us. So all the things that those priests were doing were a pointer to what he would do. Do you see? Verse 13, for if the blood of bulls and goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean, sanctified and purified flesh, he's saying if it did, which he's actually being coy here. He's saying that it really didn't sanctify anything. It was the faith that sanctified people. It was the faith in doing the things that pointed to Christ. It was their faith that was sanctifying them the whole time. But he's being coy about it, right? And he says in verse 14, how much more should the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit, the Holy Spirit, offered himself without spot, without any blemishes, with no sin to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. So he's saying that Christ's blood coming into the holiest of holies. Now, is he talking about the temple? No. He's talking about that Christ was the perfect priest and he went to heaven, to the holiest of holies, presenting his blood, perfect blood with no sin or blemish, as the sacrifice for all of you, for your conscience, to purge you from dead works. And those dead works include the works of the law. They're dead. They don't mean anything. It's your faith and your belief in God that means anything at all. Verse 15, for this cause, this is the reason he is the mediator of the New Testament, the new agreement. This word testament in Greek, it's the same as the word covenant. I can show you that real quick, but I just, because of, see, even in this rendering, they say it's diathekes. It is the covenant. It's the same word. So just realize, I don't know why they changed the English in this particular instance, but it is covenant. It's the same word that we read above. Christ is the mediator of the new agreement, testament, covenant, that by means of death, for the redemption of transgressions we were under the first testament, which they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance. Why did he do this? So that we could eternally inherit being with God. We could inherit the things of heaven. There was no way we could do that before because we were carnal, just like the priests, just like the priesthood, just like the blood of goats and bulls. We were carnal. We were materialistic. We weren't the real deal until Christ got a hold of us and made it so we could go there. But Christ was the mediator that completed everything that we needed, okay? Verse 16, wherever there is a testament or a covenant or an agreement, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator. The one on whom the agreement rests or whom it points to, if he dies, say it's a contract. If the person in the contract dies, the contract is finished. That's what's being said here. There is no more contract. So the Mosaic law here, it's the way it's describing it, it is completely done. It's completely over. There's no more Mosaic law. It doesn't matter anymore. Christ, both in his death and in his sacrifice in heaven for us, he both completed all the requirements of the Mosaic law and finished it. And then he established the new agreement, which is the agreement of Christ, the agreement of faith. The same one that goes back to the first priesthood with Melchizedek and Abraham. It's always been the same. It's always been the same thing. It's just the Jews were so wound up in their materialistic practice that they had blinded themselves to the supernatural, spiritual aspects of what they were doing. Verse 17, for a testament is of force after men are dead. Otherwise, it is of no strength at all while the testator lives. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood. Okay, the first agreements, the Mosaic law was dedicated with blood. It's using double negatives here, but it's saying the first testament was dedicated with blood. For when Moses spoke every precept to all the people according to the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water, scarlet, hyssop. All those things should ring a bell when Christ comes into the picture, right? When he passed, they had hyssop, they had scarlet, they had the water, etc. And the priest sprinkled both the book and all the people. Now, I want you to get the visual of this. Let's get the visual of what we're talking about. So we're talking about Moses and the tabernacle in the wilderness, right? So however that tabernacle looked, probably a tent of some sort, like the tent of meeting, so to speak, the way it was set up. And there was outside, they probably had a place where Moses would read the law to the people, read the writings to the people in the wilderness to keep them on track so they would understand. So you can imagine maybe a type of podium or something where the books of the law would be set out. Then you can imagine the tabernacle behind that, right? With a doorway, with a veil. This is the first veil, okay, that it was talking about earlier in the passage. Now, within the outer tent wall, then there's the veil, and they go in, and there's another tent wall, and that's the holiest of holies inside that, where the ark was, where all these implements were, and another veil, of course, between the outer court, so to speak, and the inner, the holiest of holies. Now, what he's saying here is that Moses, after reading the law before the people, he would take the blood of calves and goats and hyssop, and he would dip the hyssop in the blood, and he would sprinkle it on the book, and he would sprinkle it as he walked back into the outer court, which by all intents and purposes represented outer heaven. It represented heaven. Now, as he continues to sprinkle this, it says he sprinkled it as he went back essentially into the holiest of holies. It says in verse 20, "This is the blood of the testament God enjoined to you. Moreover, he sprinkled with blood the tabernacle and all the vessels of the ministry." So it's talking about the showbread, the table, the mercy seat on the Ark of the Covenant. So in your mind, you can imagine this. Just imagine this as like a movie. Moses speaks the law before the people, reads it out of the writings, off of the tablets. He takes the hyssop and he sprinkles them. He turns around and starts to walk into the outer court, sprinkling the blood. So there's a trail of blood on the ground. Think of that. There's a trail of blood on the ground as he's sprinkling this. He sprinkles it as he goes into the second veil of the temple, into the holiest of holies. And he sprinkles it on the ark, on the mercy seat, on all this stuff. And all of that represents Christ coming and presenting himself to the Father in the throne, at the throne of God. Walking there with his, perhaps you can imagine, I'm not sure it was this way, but the blood from his side dripping as he walks the stairs of heaven and comes before God in glory to present the perfect sacrifice because he did it without sin. So as Moses did this, and you should have this picture in your head of the trail of blood leading back into the temple to the holiest of holies, they were getting 2,000 years before Christ, they were getting a perfect picture of what was going to happen for them and for every man. It was Christ. He was going to step into the holy of holies before God the Father in heaven, before his throne. And his blood was the sacrifice that would cleanse every sin. Both the priests, in their time, the priests and the people, and then in our time, all people everywhere. As it said, no longer would the Jews need to go out and tell people about God, and tell them, hey, we serve our God in this temple, blah, blah, blah. All that was to tell all nations about who God was. He says, no longer. You don't need to do that anymore. Every man will know. Every nation will know. It's a profound and powerful picture. We have to understand what was shown to the Jews in all those practices they did and why it was. It was done so that they would then spread the news of the Most High God to all nations on earth after the Tower of Babel, after Noah's flood, right? It all makes sense. It all clicks together if we know these things. If we don't know all this context, it's hard to picture it. It's hard to understand why God did the things he did with the law, with Israel. Verse 22, almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without the shedding of blood is no remission. Why is that? Because Christ had to shed his blood for this all to occur. So that's why their law had the shedding of blood in it, so they would understand this. Verse 23, it was therefore necessary the patterns of the things in heaven should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves would be purified with better sacrifices than the blood of goats and the blood of sheep and heifers and all this. They would be purified with Christ's blood. Verse 24, for Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are figures of the true. He didn't enter the temple for this thing to be done that God needed to do, because he was the foundation of those things. The foundation of those things was in heaven at the throne. Christ entered, as it says, verse 24, into heaven itself to appear in the presence of God for us. This trail of blood leading from Christ down up the stairways of heaven, okay? All the way to the throne of God. Verse 25, nor yet that he should offer himself often as the high priest that enters the holy place every year with the blood of others. He didn't have to do it every year because it was him that the high priest was mirroring. Do you see? Everything about the Mosaic law was a mirror of what would come with Christ. That's why nobody needs to do it anymore. Nobody needs to do any of those things anymore. Every single thing that was done, even the feasts to everything, it was about Jesus. And it was about what he would do in front of his Father in heaven at the throne. Verse 26, for then must he often have suffered. If this was about Christ doing it that way, it said, then he would have had to suffer many times since the foundation of the world. But now, instead, once in the end of it says world, but this is the Greek word age, aeon. So at the end of this age, it says, this age of history, which was ending around the time of Christ, now once at the end of this age, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. As it is appointed for men once to die, because Christ came in human form, he had to die, and after this, the judgment. So Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many, or all that would have faith. And unto them that look for him shall he appear the second time without sin unto salvation. Now, that is the hope for us, for every man, not only Israel, but Gentile, everyone. Now, but you got to listen to what it says, and you also have to have a little context to understand all that he's saying here. So he's offered to bear the sins of many, and to them that look for him, that means the Christians, Israel, Judah, any of the Jews, and any Gentile, all the Christians, those that look for him, shall he appear the second time. What does it say? Without sin unto salvation. Now, what it's really saying there, not only did Christ not sin while he was on earth, but this is really talking about his appearance the second time will not be in, quote, in sin. Okay, now that is a phrase used at this time period to describe mortality, like being human. We are all born, as they would say in many of these writings, we were born in sin because we are all humans. And they said even of Christ, there's a few verses that say, he was born in sin. That doesn't mean Christ sinned. That means he was born in flesh, in sinful flesh like us. But he experienced that and went through life without sin himself, though he was, quote, born in sin. It's a phrase that meant he was mortal for a time period, in the same sense we are. But the second time he comes, it will not be in sin, meaning he won't be flesh at all. He won't come again as a man. He will appear in the heavens with the glory that is due him from his Father. And so it will be an appearing in the spiritual sense. It will be not that it's not real. Please don't misunderstand me here. It will be in every sense real, but he will be not as a human man, but in his glory that is from the Father above, and that he deserves because of the authority he has been given. So that second time we're looking for when he appears is going to be different. It's going to be different than anything that has ever happened. And so just understand what it's talking about there. It talks about the judgment in verse 27, the final judgment, because all men will stand before him at the judgment. But then we will be looking for him to appear the second time, and that will be in his spiritual glorified state, and it will be unto salvation for all mankind, all those that are believers. So, I mean, how much more could be packed into these chapters? I don't even know. I don't even think anything more could be. It's just amazing the things that are said, that if we take our time, we go through slowly, we understand the picture of the Old Testament. We understand the picture of the struggle in the wilderness that Israel had, trying to keep the law and then failing. And what did the temple and the tabernacle and Moses look like? What was it for? It was all to show the Jews, the Israelites and the Jews, what was going to happen with Jesus Christ, so that really through them, other nations could know, even before Christ came. But then when Christ came, the game was changed. Everything was changed. No more do they need to be this picture to the nations. In fact, I believe all that really ended in the first century at 70 AD with the destruction of the temple. It really ended. Now, the only thing that was important for any Jews remaining and any Gentiles in the world was Christ, belief in Christ. All the pictures of the Mosaic law pointing to Christ had been now realized in Jesus Christ. So we don't need any of that stuff. All we need to do is look at Christ. We need to obey his commands. And we need to tell everyone we can. Tell everyone we can that Christ is here. He is the sacrifice for all of that. He can cover your sins. It is about your faith and belief in him. All right, guys. That's awesome. I always just get so much out of those readings. I loved reading through that this morning in preparation. It was just like, man, this is going to be a good one. I can feel it. I was excited. Well, with that said, I can look. Flat Bob, you say when I say blah, 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 it cracks you up. Did I say? I don't even remember saying it. That's funny. All right. Oh, goodness. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get into our other topics. Let's see. Let me look at the topics I have real quick. And we will get into those. Let's see here. So I think we'll go ahead and start with Linda's topic on, you said these verses. Now, I don't remember much. Mark 13:32 through 37. I know now, looking at this, thinking about it, this is part of the Olivet Discourse. So I'm assuming you want me to kind of go there and we can talk a little bit about what those verses say. So let me share the screen back. And we'll go over to Mark and we will start to look at these verses. Yeah, Westwind, your comment is key to me. Before I go to Mark, let's talk briefly about what you just said. I think that's key and important to think about. You said, I wonder if all the Hebrew roots Christians keeping Mosaic law movements are much more insidious than we realize. I have had that thought before myself, Westwind. I have wondered, like, what would be in it for Satan to get us all to really just focus on keeping Mosaic law? I mean, Christ is usually a part of what those groups believe too, but does somehow the practice of the law, is it a trap? I don't know. It seems that it might be that way a little bit. It does feel like it could be that way. And you do wonder sometimes if some of those channels are propped up, perhaps by even Jewish donors. You just don't know, right? And so I have wondered about that in the past. I think it's a very astute comment, a very astute thing to say. At any rate, it kind of puts Israel first again, right? If you're honoring all those laws that, they say, even now, the modern Jews, of course, they would love for all Christians to just practice up all those rituals of the Old Covenant. They would just get giddy over that. They also would probably say under their breath that we were goyim and pigs and animals, and that there was, we weren't doing anything good for anybody, but they would laugh their butts off, right? So that's really the maybe ironic part of that, is that I think that most of the Hebrew roots people have a very strong affinity for Israel, right? It's very dispensational. They're like, oh, yeah, we love Israel. We love all the practices of the law. And on the other side of that, the Jews look down their noses at that. They probably think that we animals shouldn't be doing their law, but they would say, they would give it lip service, right? But in private, they would be like, those goyim, they don't have a clue. They don't really have a clue. And they can do whatever they want, but they're still animals, right? So, I don't know. It's rough. We have lost people on this channel for this very reason. We've lost people over the law discussion. Some very, to me, important people. Like, I care about these people. You may remember one specifically that was on the channel and now isn't. I can do nothing about that other than try to tell what I think is true, right? And we're reading in Hebrews what is true, so I don't know how to apologize for that. I can't apologize for that. But I love those people, and I want them to come back and realize they don't have to do any of that stuff. And really that's what I've taught. I mean, I had that video. In fact, the person I'm thinking of, it was after the video I did where the early Christians' writings, I did on the early church fathers talking about the law. And they were saying really harsh things about it, like it is a waste of your time and it's a trap. It doesn't do anything for you at all. And they were saying, we have given up all of those things because of Christ. We have now turned to Christ. Even the Sabbath, they were like, we don't practice the Sabbath. We practice the Sunday gathering like we're doing here. They did the same thing. That's why I tried to pattern this after what they do, right? Because that to me is the truth of the situation. Of course, you get into those discussions with some of those people and they'll say like things like, they've changed our Bibles or they've hidden writings or something. They'll come up with really far-fetched excuses at that point. So it's sad. It's a little sad. But Westwind, it's a really smart question. Thank you for mentioning that. All right. So let's do this. Let's go now into our topics I was about to go into. Mark 13, verse 32 through 37. So let's go back there and start that discussion. Mark chapter 13. Let's get this going. All right. So you said verse 32 through 37. Yes. I think I know what part this is. Verse 32 through 37. Yes. Okay. Of that day and that hour knows no man, not the angels in heaven, nor the Son, nor the Father. But the Father. The Father, the Most High God, is the only one that knows the day and the hour. What day and hour is he talking about? Well, he's talking about, where is the stuff he's talking about? How does it come into this? Yeah, see, we're way down in this discussion already. Yeah. Okay, so we've got to back up a little, Linda, before this will make any sense whatsoever. Because you're in the middle of Christ standing with the apostles, the ones that asked him this. What did they ask him? Well, they asked him, hey, Jesus, when shall these things be? What Christ had just said was that, well, the temple and everything, because they were sitting on the Mount of Olives, and they were looking across, and you could see the whole temple. You could see all of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. So they're looking over there, and Jesus said, hey, look at the great buildings. There won't be one stone left upon another. Well, what's he talking about in that phrase? It's definitely 70 AD, right? 70 AD, all the temple was destroyed. All these buildings were destroyed, turned to rubble, more or less. After the actual destruction of the temple, the next few days and weeks, the Romans just kind of leveled a lot of stuff in the city. So that's what Jesus was talking about, obviously. And then he sat down. He sat down on the Mount of Olives, across from the temple is where they were. And Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him, well, when will these things be? And what will be the sign that all these things will be fulfilled? So you got to kind of, to me, to understand this fully, you got to put yourself there on the mount with Jesus. And if you had been sitting next to, let's say, John, when he said this, Jesus, maybe it was John that asked this, because John was the one who got the vision in Revelation, right? He seemed to be the one that God loved, the one that God would share the visions of the future with, right? So maybe it was John that asked this. He was the one interested. When will these things be? What things? The temple being destroyed. He asked about the temple. When is that going to happen? What will be the sign when those things will be fulfilled, right? So that's the main question. It really sounds like it is about 70 AD, the events that we know happen in 70 AD. So Jesus begins to answer them. Now, his answer comes in the next few verses, right? He directly answers their questions, right? He says, people will deceive you. Many will come in my name and say, hey, I'm a Christ, and they'll deceive people. We have examples of this from Simon Magus, okay, who was during this time period. And I've started that series. I'm going to do the next one soon. Verse 7, you'll hear of wars, rumors of wars, nations rising against nation. There are a lot of things happening, kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes. All these things did happen leading up to 70 AD. There will be famines and troubles. These are the beginnings of sorrows, okay? There were sorrows coming. Who were the disciples that just talked and asked this question? They were Jews, right? So these sorrows are about the Jews, okay? So we can couch this in the mindset of Peter, James, John, and Andrew, right? Take heed for yourselves. They'll deliver you to councils. We know this happened. The book of Acts records this. In synagogues, you'll be beaten. We went through the book of Acts together. We saw them being beaten for the gospel, right? As Paul went through his missionary journeys and the other apostles. You will be brought before rulers and kings for my sake. This all happened. The gospel must be first published among all nations. Well, that's interesting because that happened in Pentecost. So the gospel was published by the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, goes out to all nations, right? Because all those guys go back from Jerusalem to their nations, and so at least the news goes out. And then the apostles start doing their journeys. They're starting to turn Gentiles towards Christ. But then they will lead you and deliver you up. Don't worry about what you need to say because the Holy Ghost will give the words to you, it says. It's talking about all the things they were going to experience. Brothers shall betray brothers, fathers, the son, children will rise up against parents, etc., etc. And they will cause people to be put to death for this, right? All this will happen. And you will be hated of all men for my name. That happened, right? But when you see the abomination of desolation, now, he's like saying, now think about this too, again, as if you're sitting there and Jesus had just said these things to you. I think if you saw it, like maybe, I don't know if the series The Chosen shows this appropriately. I'm sure it has the Olivet Discourse. I haven't watched that, but I probably need to. But I can see Jesus sitting here saying these things. And in the moment, if I was sitting there, this is, I would think about this a little differently than I think we usually think of it coming to it. He says, but, after all these things he's listed that are going to happen, he says, but when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel. Now, in the Luke 21 version of this, it says this abomination is the Roman armies coming into Jerusalem. So we can, I think, safely insert that here. When you see the armies of Rome coming into Jerusalem, this was spoken of by Daniel as the abomination of desolation, standing where they ought not to be, let those in Judea flee. So he's telling them in answer to their question, when the armies of Rome come in, you got to get out of here. Okay? These guys lived in this area, right? They were from Galilee, but they knew this area, and they were living in Bethany at the time, right? Just the other side of the Mount of Olives from Jerusalem. So sitting there, he's like, when you see this, this is the sign you're looking for. They had just asked him, when were the walls of the temple going to be torn down? When was all this going to happen? He's answering them, right? He says all these other things will happen to you, but then when you see the abomination of the Roman armies, you got to flee to the mountains. Let him on the housetop not go down, but just get out, okay? Let him in the field go. Woe to them with a child. Pray that your flight's not in the winter. For in those days will be affliction, etc., since not from the beginning of creation till whatever. All that about what's going to happen. And it was bad. Like if you read about what happened in Jerusalem, the thing that's always brought up is the cannibalism. There was some cannibalism happening because they couldn't get food in and out of the city because of the siege, right? So it was a really terrible, terrible thing. Verse 20, except that the Lord would shorten those days, then no flesh would be saved. Now, he's not talking about all flesh on the whole world. He's talking about no one in Jerusalem would be saved, but he says for the elect's sake, those who are saved, he will choose to shorten the days. It won't be a really long period that the siege of Jerusalem would happen. So it wasn't a very long period. It was essentially about 3.5 years, right? And so that kind of matches some of the other prophecies. So if any man says to you, here's Christ, or there, don't believe him, false Christ, false prophets, blah, blah, blah. Behold, take heed, behold, I have now foretold you all things. Now, the Greek here in this one verse, verse 23, changes the tenor of what's happening. Now, he's just gone through everything that's going to happen to you guys sitting in front of me. You're going to experience famines. There'll be earthquakes. You'll be taken before rulers. I'll give you the words to say when that happens. Don't worry about it, but it's going to happen. And when the armies come in, you got to flee. So he's now answered their question. He just answered their questions, right? Now it takes a different tone. He says, and in the Greek, this is literally, but verily, I have told you before all things, right? He's not talking anymore now, I believe, about 70 AD. He's saying, behold, before now in our ministry together, I have sat you down. I've told you about all sorts of things. So now he's going into something different. Behold, in those days after the tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give light, the stars of heaven will fall. These prophecies here that we're now reading match every other great tribulation prophecy I've ever seen in the Bible and in any other writing. These things now, the verses you're talking about, Linda, these match those prophecies. So to me, this will not in any way relate to 70 AD. I think he's already answered their questions. He's already answered their questions up here. Now he's saying, hey, by the way, I have told you all things. Now he's going to explain a little more about all things that he's prophesied as far as eschatology. He's going to say that the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give light, the stars of heaven fall, the powers of heaven are shaken. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power, and he will send his angels and gather the elect from the four winds. This is exactly what happens at the great white throne appearing of Christ that we just read about in Hebrews, when he appears in glory, not in sin anymore. He appears in glory. Then he will send his angels and gather the elect from the four winds. Why would he do that in 70 AD? It doesn't make any sense. Now, but it does make sense at the great white throne. He's going to gather all the elect to himself in heaven. Because Christ appears, he gathers all of us if we're alive at that time. He gathers us to him before the judgment occurs, okay? From the uttermost parts of the earth to the uttermost parts of heaven. The ones in heaven who have died prior that we've now also been reading about in Hebrews. You know, this is what you got to put it all together. I wish it was easier. Our minds don't really always compute like this. But from the uttermost parts of heaven, all those Christians who have died prior to Christ's coming at the great white throne will be also come with him in the clouds. That's what all the texts say, right? All the different texts about it. So now he is talking about those things. I believe truly that this is just Christ after he has told them when the city will be destroyed, when the temple will be destroyed. He's now telling them, look, this is the important stuff, though, for you guys. If you flee that, you get out of that. This is the important stuff. Learn the parable of the fig tree. When her branch is tender, puts forth leaves, know the summer is near. In like manner, when these things come to pass, it is nigh at the doors. Verily I say to you, the generation shall not pass till these things be done. So he's switched back now. The fig tree parable mention and the like manner, when these things come to pass, he's talking about what he answered them with as far as Jerusalem. It's at the doors. The generation here will not pass till these things are done. Now, I know some of you guys will think, well, you sure are switching things up on us, Bible scribe. You seem to be going through there and you're saying this is this and that is that. I'm saying that because of the context I have from all the other writings that I've read about this stuff. And they all of them say that the portion we read about heaven, the stars falling, the elect being gathered, all those things have to do with the final judgment. So then he's swapping back, I believe, and he's saying, look, like the fig tree, when her branches are tender and puts forth leaves, you know the summer's near. So be aware. He's saying, so be aware. I've told you, when the Roman armies come in, you got to get out. Verily, this generation won't pass till these things are done. Okay? So he says in verse 31, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not. He's just telling them, this is true. You can count on it. Okay? Because I've told you about the final things when heaven and earth pass away, really, is what he's saying. I've told you about those things, and that's really going to happen too. But my words about this will not change. They are true. You can count on them. And of that day and hour of the passing of the earth and those other things, no man knows. The angels don't know. The Son doesn't know, but the Father knows when it's going to happen. Now, what he's talking about is what's coming in our future. And I personally believe it's our very immediate future within the next, for me, I believe within the next 40 years, okay, is what we're talking about here. I could be wrong, and I'm not trying to, tell you, there's anything you need to change in your life about that other than be closer to God than you've ever been before. But I believe we're talking about something very near to us. He says, take heed, watch and pray, for you know not when that time is. The Son of Man is as a man taking a far journey. Now, this is important. This part of it also helps you understand. The Son of Man, like a man taking a far journey. Well, that's what we are in right now. The Son of Man is in heaven. It's as if he has taken a journey. He left his house. And what did he do? He gave authority to his servants. We are his servants. Now, some people who are preterist would say, well, he's talking about the time between, when he says this and 70 AD. But that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit with other contexts. It doesn't fit with what he's about to say. To every man his work, and commanded the porter to watch. Every man his work. That sounds like things that are talked about further on in the Gospels about the gifts of the Spirit. Like, what is your job in the church? What do you do as part of the kingdom of God? What are you doing while the Son of Man is away, before he comes back to the house to take it for himself, before he comes back to take us all? So this makes more sense in the context of a future understanding of the great white throne judgment, right? Now he says, watch therefore, you know not when the master of the house comes, at evening or midnight or cock crowing or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he finds you sleeping. And what I say unto you, this is also key. What I say to you, I say to all. Watch. Now, he's blended two things here, but I think you can understand why. And this is also part of why I believe that what God and Christ did with Jerusalem in 70 AD was a precursor, a picture of what's going to happen at the end. Okay? I truly believe that right now, I'm still, that's a working theory, but it's a very well working theory. It seems to have a lot of legs, if you know what I mean, and it seems to work with everything I keep reading. That what happened with Israel, particularly from the time of Christ's ascension to the next 40 years, the destruction of Israel was a foreshadowing of what happens with the entire world at the end. Okay? A destruction by fire, a judgment, so to speak. You know, they were judged at that time. Israel was judged for their disobedience in terms of the last, I don't know how many, years. Overall, God was finished. There was a start to Israel. There was an end to Israel in 70 AD. So all the parallels I can think of between that and all of history match. Okay, that's what I'm trying to say. So this, to me, by the way, this verse 36 and 37, lest coming suddenly he finds you sleeping, and what I say to you all, watch. This was a clarion call, by the way, used by all the Christians from this time forward, way past 70 AD. I mean, they were all saying these things. They were saying you need to obey God, don't fall into sin, don't backslide, because you don't want him to find you sleeping. You don't want to not be watching when it actually happens. So I just want to say that, the context, when we come from the scriptures and we see what the Christians all said about these things, it's pretty obvious to me what everyone thought these meant. And although this passage itself can be complicated, seems at times, I think that what I just said to you is really the best interpretation based on all available literature and evidence from the Christians. That seems to be the best interpretation based on those who were closest to this time period. Okay? So I know there's a lot there. It's hard sometimes to parse that, but to me, Linda, that is what we're talking about. Russell, you say that Josephus also implored the Jews to flee. Yes, he did. And you said, Linda, that's why God wanted me to ask today. It goes with what we just read. Thank you, Lord. Yes, it does. It all connects, Linda. There's no mistakes. And yes, I think God prompted you to ask because, it's all a connective tissue between everything. The difficulty, I think, is in being able to hold all that in your brain and remember it all when you need to. That's, to me, the hard part. I'm happy that I'm able to do that in some way, and help with that. But it does, I think, take kind of a very holistic view to make it make sense. If you don't have that context, then yes, you could take this whole speech at once and, like the preterists do, and I am guilty of this in the past, saying that all of this was about the same thing, the same event, and that everything Christ said here was all done in 70 AD. The problem is that no Christian of the time period or afterward believed that. No Christian. You can't find a single writing from any Christian that said that about what is talked about in this. So I take that corpus of evidence, many different writers that all said that after this time that they believed that these things were what they were. I take that and I let it inform me, because I guess in a way I don't feel like from only this text I can fully understand what is being said here. That's why I use the guidance of the earliest Christians to help inform me. And I would say this, that if I had found, instead of what I did find, which was that all the Christians agree with what I just told you, if I instead had found, well, there were a couple or three or a few, maybe half and half. Some of them believed all of it was fulfilled in 70 AD, and then the rest thought, no, it wasn't. If I had found that, I might still be partial preterist in some of this. But that's not what I found. What I found was that every single one of them was looking towards the future coming after 70 AD. Every single one. So that's where I sit on that. All right. Yeah, Patriot, I've got your topic on the Nicolaitans. So we're going to do that. That's on my list. In fact, that's the next one. Let me do the Nicolaitans topic next for you, Patriot. Let's do that. All right. Let me look this up because it's been a while since I looked up the Nicolaitans. And just on the quick search I did, let's refresh our memories here, because I don't remember anything about Nicolaitans. But let's refresh ourselves. I had already, as you can see, I've already highlighted some things in this page, so I've obviously looked at this before. Nicolaism was an early Christian sect mentioned twice in the book of Revelation. Okay. The adherents called Nicolaitans, they were considered heretical according to Revelation 2:6 and 15. Let me open that real quick while we're looking at this. So Revelation 2. Verse 6. Yeah, so mentioned in context with the church of Ephesus. Remember therefore from whence you were fallen and repented and did the first works, or else I'll come to you quickly and remove the candlestick, except you repent. This has thou hast, that thou hate the deeds of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. So he mentions that the church of Ephesus, at very least, was against the Nicolaitan belief system. So we'll learn about that in just a second. Then in verse, what did it say? Verse 15. Let's go down there and read that real quick. And this is in the context of the church of Pergamos. So the church of Pergamos had these problems. They dwelled near the seat of Satan. You know, they had temples in Pergamos, of course, to the Greek and Roman gods. I have things against you that you hold the doctrine of Balaam, which he was a sorcerer, right? Who taught Balak to cast a stumbling block before Israel, etc. We've studied that stuff before. I have a video on Balaam, and that's a good video. I like that video a lot. So these were things they had problems with, eating things sacrificed to idols and fornication. And so hast thou also them that hold the doctrine of Nicolaitans. So in addition to those things, I hate, he says, the doctrine of the Nicolaitans. So let's read more about that doctrine. The early church fathers mentioned the Nicolaitans: Irenaeus, Tertullian, Clement, Hippolytus, Epiphanius, Theodoret. So obviously a lot of, intense attack from the Christians on the Nicolaitans. And what else here? Irenaeus says they lead lives of unrestrained indulgence. So they probably would eat to their satisfaction. They would have sex to their satisfaction. They probably had more pretty much a Thalamist type attitude towards life, which is do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, is the Thalamist mantra, right? So they probably did that kind of thing. It was whatever they wanted to do, they would do it, they would indulge in it, and that was part of their religion, their belief system. Irenaeus says the character of these men is plainly pointed out in the Apocalypse of John, meaning Revelation, as we just read, when they are represented as teaching that it is a matter of indifference to practice adultery and eat things sacrificed to idols. So, in addition to the gluttony and the sexual stuff they would do, it's saying that they would eat sacrificial meat. They would do all of these things. And they probably also held some kinds of pseudo-Christian beliefs. So they kind of like lumped it all together, I would imagine. Augustine of Hippo ascribed them to the Cerinthian doctrine. Cerinthus is another of these Gnostic teachers. So all of this is Gnosticism, by the way. Cerinthus, an early Gnostic, it says from 50 to 100 AD, prominent as a Pharisaic view of the early church fathers. So they denounced him. Let's see what he believed. If I can find that. Beliefs. Let's go there. We don't have a full understanding of Cerinthus' teachings. Irenaeus talks about him. Educated in the wisdom of Egyptians and claimed an angelic inspiration. This is funny because as you all see when I do my next Simon Magus video on the doctrines that Simon Magus taught, you will see this, that everything he taught was from the angels. He talks about the angels and the laws of the angels being written, and that the angels were no good for them or whatever. But there was lots of this angelic stuff. It was more focused on angels than it was God. Of course, the Gnostic view of God was that he was bad, right? And that's part of what Simon Magus himself taught. But as we see here, Cerinthus, the foundation of the Nicolaitans, he claimed angelic inspiration, right? Let's see, what else? Yeah, so they're not going to have a ton on his beliefs, but he taught that the visible world and heavens were not made by God, but by lesser powers distinct from him. This is also what Simon Magus taught. So again, the Simon Magus doctrinal video will be really good. I'm excited to do it, but I got to get there and do it. He taught that this power was ignorant of the existence of a supreme God. Cerinthus distinguished between the man Jesus and the Christ. He separated the two. He denied the virgin birth. He taught that the Christ descended on Jesus in the form of the dove. So do you see what he's doing? He's separating Jesus from the Christ, and he's saying that Jesus was just a man, and that at the baptism where the dove descended, they can't deny that these things happened, but they twisted them. So he would say that when the Holy Spirit descended, that was actually the Christ Spirit, okay? So that essentially this is, what would you call this in Trinitarian discussions? Is this, I don't know, but it's part of that discussion of the nature of Christ, where he's saying, Cerinthus would say he was a fully human, but then the Christ Spirit came down into him, right? And then at his crucifixion, that spirit left the Jesus human again. So anyway, I don't want to go into all these, but this is interesting. I would encourage you guys to read more about this. Does that Patriot help at all? Does that help at all? You said Podgy had a video about it on here and was wondering, I kind of like her views on stuff. Have you looked at anything of hers, David? No, I haven't. I don't think I have. I'll put it in my notes to maybe peruse K Poji, if that's how you say it. But yeah, this is all part and parcel of the same thing. And I think when you see the Simon Magus thing, you're, like me, maybe your brain will explode. You'll be like, wow, Simon Magus was at the root of so many things that are modern. And this is the same thing, the Nicolaitans, Cerinthus. It all is from the same place, and it is from the pit of hell. I'll just tell you that's from the pit of hell. And has infected people all over the world, including people I know and am close to. And so, man, it's from hell itself. So, such an insidious doctrine, and one that misconstrues your entire concept of who God is. Just totally destroys it if you believe it. The problem is you'll realize that all these doctrines are angel-based. And that makes sense because these angels that fell from heaven in Genesis 6, and then following that up with the principality angels after the Tower of Babel, they all turned against God and turned to their own ways. So it makes sense that they would then try to get men to worship them. And that's exactly what they did. So that's what we see in reality, is that Gnosticism, Egyptian mysticism, it was all an extension of angel worship in some way or another. At the very least, it was a very distorted contortion of the trueness of who God is, the Godhead. Okay? God the Father, the Most High God. That's why he's called the Most High God by all the ancient writings. Because he was the Most High. Now, of course, the Gnostic beliefs will change that into, no, there's no Most High God. There's a source that's really not a person. There's a source that is the source of everything, and it's not personable. You can't relate to it, but it's like power. It's kind of like the Force in the movies, the Star Wars movies, right? It's the Force. It's a power. It's not a personal thing. And then they'll say, yes, there's the demiurge, and then there's these archons. Well, now you're getting into angel talk. It's all angels. And the angels from, all the start of history have wanted to, mess with humans' minds so they will then worship them and do what they want as opposed to what God wants. So, if you understand those things, it's just very clear that that's what's happened throughout history. And that Satan has used that thread and will continue to use it till the last days on earth. He will continue to use that thread to try to skew what people believe about God and destroy what people believe about Christ. Okay, that's of course Satan's complete goal, right? So that more people will come to his side and that he will be able to take them straight to hell in the end. That's the whole point, right? All right. All right. Okay, let's go on to our next topic. This is taking the Lord's name in vain. And this is from West Wind. You asked about this, West Wind. So let me see if I can find the verses that talk about this. Maybe West Wind, you already know them. Name, and I'm going to see if I can find the verses in the Bible. Okay, so it's everything I'm seeing that has the words name and vain is in the Old Testament. So let me look at some of those verses. Let's look at it together. So Exodus 20, verse 7. Now, of course, this would be as part of the Mosaic law, really. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You will have no other gods before me. Don't make a graven image or a likeness of anything in heaven or the earth. You will not bow down yourself to them or serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the sins of the fathers upon the children, to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. So, showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that takes his name in vain. Let me see what my cross-references are on this. So, the writing Against Praxeus by Tertullian. Let me read some context for that with what he's talking about. But I would say here, he goes into, this is, of course, the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20. He then goes on to remember the Sabbath day, etc., and etc. Then before this, he's talking about, what is he talking about? Yeah, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Okay. So here it's like we don't get a lot, do we, out of Exodus 20, verse 7? We don't get a lot there. So let me check this cross-reference further and see what Tertullian is saying about it. If I can get back there. Here we go. Is the word of God, I'm reading back in verse 14, is that word of God then a void and empty thing, which is called the Son, meaning Jesus, who himself is designated God. The Word was with God. The Word was God. It is written, you will not take the Lord's name or God's name in vain. Now that's interesting because the reason that's interesting, and I say that, is because he mentions the Word of God, Christ. He also mentioned that the Son is designated, or who himself is designated as God. So this, you can see this if you're thinking Greek. You can see he's saying the logo, ta theou, and then he's saying the Son designated himself as theou, or theos. He was a divinity. The Word was with God, meaning Christ was with God. He's, of course, quoting John 1:1 here, that Jesus was with the Father, and the Word, Jesus, was also divine. Okay? It's written, you will not take God's name in vain. Now, I think what he's saying there is that this applies to Christ as well as God the Father. You don't take the name of Christ or the Father in vain. He says, this for certain is he who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Now, he doesn't mean the same as God, but he means equivalent in that he was. And again, this is one of those verses, these are hard verses. You have to read it in the Greek and see. It's saying it was not wrong or incorrect for him to also be divine. Okay, theos. Jesus was theos. God was theos. They both were theos. That doesn't mean they were the same person, okay? As Linda was talking about earlier with the Trinity stuff. In what form of God? In what form of divinity? Of course, he means in some form, not in none. Now, this is, by the way, this writing of Tertullian's is the one that most Trinitarians point to and try to say, well, Tertullian was supporting Trinity here. That's not true, because they can't read in Greek. So they're reading the English version and not understanding the words. For who will deny that theos is a body, although theos is also a spirit? For spirit has bodily substance. See, he's talking about the nature of who God and who Christ are here. What are they like? They don't necessarily have a body. They have spirit, etc. So I don't know. This here is, he's not using this verse to explain taking the Lord's name in vain. So I don't think reading this passage is going to give us anything additional on that topic, West Wind. So this is frustrating. I had hoped that it would have more on that. Let me see if the other verses mentioned. See, like Psalm 139, verse 20. Let's look at this one real quick. David says, surely you will slay the wicked, O God, and depart from me, therefore, you bloody men. He's talking to the wicked. For they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. So that's interesting. So whatever this means here, as far as David's talking about, taking the name of the Lord in vain, he's saying the wicked people do that. Now, David's wicked people are like Canaanites and stuff like that, right? They are the other nations that surrounded Israel at this time period, right? So that's interesting. He says, I hate them, O Lord, that hate thee, and am I not grieved with those that rise up against you? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them my enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart, and know my thoughts. If there's any wicked way in me, lead me to the way everlasting. So in some sense, he's saying those wicked peoples were taking the name of the Lord, of God, in vain. So that's an interesting statement. Let's just consider that, and let's see if the other ones give us more. Proverbs 30, verse 9. Why don't we look at that one real quick? Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of God in vain. So this kind of is interesting. I think it helps us a little. It likens the taking of the name of God in vain to people who would deny God and say, "Who is God? I don't know who God is." Now that apparently might be somewhat taking the name of God in vain. You're saying the name of God, but you don't understand who he is, or you don't believe who he is. So maybe that might be a part of what we're talking about here. It says, "Lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain." So in this context, if this is Proverbs, let's assume it's Solomon writing this. Isn't he the one that wrote Proverbs? He loves God, right? In general, from what we know from the time of these writings. He loves God, but he's saying, lest I be poor and start to steal things, and I disobey God, and in that way then would be taking the name of God in vain. Now, I think that is a better picture of what it means to take the name of the Lord or God in vain. It's lip service, but then on the other hand, you're doing things that are against his commandments. So that, I mean, even from the start, we could probably assume that was maybe the meaning, but this kind of confirms that type of mentality. Okay, so if you're saying that God is your God, okay, the Most High God is your God, but then you're doing the wrong things, it is vanity. It's vanity. It's taking his name in vain. All right, so we're denying who he is through our actions. That's probably what we're talking about here. Let me see. There's one thing I was thinking of another verse, and I haven't seen it yet. I'm trying to. Yeah, so, okay, this might be what I was thinking. Some of the statements on vanity in the New Testament. So like 1 Corinthians 15, if Christ is not risen, then our preaching is vain, and your faith is in vain. Okay, that's not really anything about taking his name in vain, but the idea of vanity. It's like when the idea of vanity in the Bible is like when something is true, but you deny it, right? Something is true, but you pretend like it's not, or you act against it. Verse 17, if Christ is not raised, your faith is in vain, right? In Galatians 2, I do not frustrate the grace of God, for if righteousness came by the law, then Christ would be dead in vain. So that almost is saying, if you extrapolate that a little bit, it's almost saying like if you are doing the works of the law thinking that's doing anything for you, then you are acting in vain, right? It's not doing anything for you. Really is what that's saying. And the book of Galatians is heavy on the, anti-law stuff. It's the Mosaic law is finished. So, yeah, that makes sense there. Philippians 2, it says, now this is probably a good one. Philippians 2:16, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ when he comes. So this is all we've been talking about this morning. Paul saying, holding forth the word of life, Jesus, the word of life, that I may rejoice when he comes in the day of Christ. Okay? So that I have not run in vain and not labored in vain. So that, in a kind of backhanded way, is saying, if you were not running the race correctly, you're not obeying the teachings of Christ, if you're not obeying the commands of Christ, then it's vain for you to think you're a Christian. It's vanity. And in the end, if you have not run the race, then, he will deny you before his Father. If you are not truly one of his disciples, one of his flock, right? So it's kind of in a backwards way saying the same thing. Don't have a vain life. You're not going to labor in vain for Christ. He wants to rejoice when Christ comes because of his obeying the commands of Christ. So I don't know. That's kind of what it says. I think that's the best we can do. Chrissy, you said something about the Nicolations, and I will check your email on that. I'll check your email on that. That's going to tie in good with my stuff on Simon Magus, so maybe I'll be able to use that in some way. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, Annie, vanity is like something that's empty. It's something that is being said or proclaimed, but it's not true. It's not real. Or something real that's being denied. Okay, so it's kind of both ways. Yeah. Okay. Now we'll go to the next topic. Jane asked this. What are my thoughts on C.S. Lewis? So, C.S. Lewis, and Jane said, would love to hear your thoughts on C.S. Lewis. I always loved his books as a child, and I'm pretty sure you're referring to the Chronicles of Narnia books, right? The 7 books. 7, by the way. Interesting. But rereading them as an adult with my own children made me rethink his theology. Was he a believer, or was he an occultist? Here's what I know about that, Jane. I have read a few books by C.S. Lewis, a few that I really enjoyed, some that I didn't enjoy so much. One thing about C.S. Lewis to know is he's very much a dispensationalist in his theology. Okay, he came up in the middle of the 20th century and learned dispensationalism right along with the rest of Christianity, right? So we know that he had dispensational beliefs. That's the part of C.S. Lewis teaching that I don't appreciate so much, right? Of course. But overall, my impression of what I've read of C.S. Lewis, he was a very good Christian, a very devout Christian, and he was a very studied Christian. He definitely knew his scriptures, and a lot of what he taught, especially like some of his philosophy stuff, like he wrote in Mere Christianity, a lot of that is very good. It's very, very sound. It's very good. Not everything. I do believe also, if I'm not mistaken, he had some Calvinistic beliefs that I probably would disagree with somewhat. But you mentioned the Chronicles of Narnia. Now, what I know about the Chronicles of Narnia was that he was very close friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, right? The one who did The Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series. Let me look something up real quick on this, because I have some information on this, if I can spell Tolkien right. All right, J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes. Okay, so J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were both members of a kind of literary discussion group. So a lot of this type thing was happening, especially in the 50s, 60s, 70s even, where they would go to coffee houses, essentially, and they would have a discussion every few days or weeks or whatever. The name of their group was called the Inklings. Okay, the kind of cute name. But C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien were a part of this group together. And the way I understand it, if I'm not mistaken, is that they had an agreement to both go their own ways and try to write allegorical stories that embodied Christianity and their belief systems, as well as kind of some world events and things like that. And so they both went their separate ways. And of course, out of that, you got C.S. Lewis' Chronicles of Narnia, and you got J.R.R. Tolkien's conception of things, which he put into the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series, right? That's how I understand that those things kind of came about. I also know that J.R.R. Tolkien's writings from the Lord of the Rings, also a lot of his material came out of his experiences in the war in the British military, if I'm not mistaken. But that's kind of another topic. We could talk J.R.R. Tolkien another time. And I believe there's some incredible things in the Lord of the Rings series that he put there, and that Peter Jackson, when he actually made the movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, Peter Jackson picked up on those things and sort of expanded them to speak about our current time period. Now, a lot could be said about that, and the reason I mention it is because I'm so interested in it. It's such a cool topic, but I'm not going to talk about that today. Let's go back to C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. To me, the Chronicles of Narnia, I understand what you're saying. You said you've kind of come back to those writings now, and you've read some more, reread them a little bit, and now they have a different tone to you. And I feel and have felt that before too. But the reason I think that is, I came back to those, especially after the movies. The Chronicles of Narnia, they had the first 3 books that came out as movies that were published by Disney. But those movies, let me look something up real quick. I want to tell you something that is important that you understand about those movies. Chronicles of Narnia. Okay. Chronicles of Narnia. Let's see. I got to type it in a different way. There it is. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So the Chronicles of Narnia, if you remember this. Now, there's a lot of things in this that feel very strange and weird. Okay. So especially with our modern sensibilities, because of the awakening that's been happening in the last few years, last decade or so. We have a lot of symbolism in our minds that brings things to mind that may not have been appropriate for the time in which they wrote these books. Do you see what I'm saying? So we come to these now with some very current modern symbolism from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s that probably wasn't on the minds of the people at the time these were written. So when we're talking about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I guess I'm kind of talking about the books now. When we talk about the books, I don't think that there's anything wrong or particularly sinister about C.S. Lewis's 7-book set on the Chronicles of Narnia. I think he was trying to represent Christian beliefs and ideas in a fun format. And he even says this, by the way. He says that he was trying to represent in a format that was fun for kids to understand and enjoy. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia as children's books, right? That was his intent. And so when you go back to that now, you can see even in the movies that we've got the Ice Queen. And we have these representations of evil that are always defeated by, of course, the lion Aslan and his work through these people, these kids. Okay? Now, I think when I back up and look at this, the symbolism is very cool. Okay? And the symbolism is of Christ literally defeating the witch queen, the queen of ice, the witch queen. And even sacrificing himself on the stone table for it, right? And if you remember, the movie represents this in a very Christian way, okay? The stone table cracks, his blood runs down. It's very powerful. It was moving to me. I mean, I probably have cried a number of times watching that movie, honestly, even though it's a kid's movie, and I, you know me, I'm a softie. But then it goes further, and the other movies, I will say, continue to push the narrative. The movies bring it to a modern context. So I would encourage people to watch the movies, although they are kids' movies. I will say that. They have a kid bent to them. I think the movies are just like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings series. They are geared towards our modern time to help us understand a little bit. You see in the second movie, you see nations of men fighting against each other and the armies of Satan coming against the kingdom of men to destroy it. But then again, Aslan helping his people, his citizens, to overcome the armies of darkness and cause the cooperation of men with evil to fail in the end. Okay? It's a very powerful symbolic statement. Then in the third movie, you see them at the end of the movie fighting a dragon. Okay, a very specific symbol, right? Fighting a dragon. And then in the end of the movie, some of them crossing over into what should be referred to as heaven. Okay, after the fact. So there's all of that happening. Okay, so I think personally that I get a lot of good out of both the books and the movies. Now, when it comes to the movies, the thing I was going to mention to you is that these writers for this movie, I'm going to pop it open and show you the writers real quick. Ann Peacock, Adamson, Marcus, and McFeely. Now, Christopher Marcus and McFeely have a background in some other movies you might be interested to know about. Let me pop open Stephen McFeely. Now, what else did he write? He wrote Captain America First Avenger. He wrote Avengers Endgame. Now, I don't know if you guys realize it. If you follow me on my Sci-Cry channel, you know I've gone over the Avengers Endgame, and I believe that it was a message to us about what is happening in our current time. I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't believe there's any mistaking that. But I have the Sci-Cry video on that. I'll actually post the link to that. Let me do it real quick. So my website, by the way, my search on my website works really good now, and it searches everything that I've done. So it's easier to find things. But I'm going to show you or post the link to this on Rumble for you guys. So that if you want, you can go see what I see in this movie. But just so you know, Stephen McFeely and that Christopher Marcus, they both worked on all of the Chronicles of Narnia movies. They wrote them. And then they moved over and worked on, at least McFeely worked on Avengers Endgame and some other notable movies that all have the same themes. Infinity War, Captain America Civil War, Captain America Winter Soldier. All of these are actually, if you don't realize it, built to give you a picture of what's going on in the modern context, okay? Behind the scenes. Okay, I know it sounds crazy, but they wrote Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe. They did the screenplay. They did the screenplay for Prince Caspian and Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So I'm just getting into that because that's an area of interest for me. I've just thoroughly enjoyed finding the messages that have been left in these movies for us. But if that helps at all, Jane, I want to go back to the books and just say that I believe the books by C.S. Lewis were good and were meant for a good purpose, to show people how God does conquer in this world and overall tell a story that's similar to the biblical narrative in some sense. But we do need to realize that C.S. Lewis is not a perfect human, right? I mean, none of us are, and I think that his major weakness was that he was a dispensationalist. But I don't think there's any problems with the books. Other than, I mean, he does represent evil pretty well. And just like in The Lord of the Rings with Tolkien, he represents evil really well. It's almost like, especially with Tolkien, like he knew what evil was, right? That they had seen it. They had experienced it in their time, especially right during and after the World Wars. So they had had a very sour taste of communism and all these different things happening with the Bolsheviks. And the Russians at that time, mostly Bolsheviks, okay? They call them Russians, but that was the Russians that invaded and raped all the people in Germany after the World Wars. They were like, maybe some Russians, but a lot of them were Bolsheviks and a lot of them were Mongols. They had actually used different armies from different people, and they came in and just raped and pillaged the entire lands of Germany after. It was ridiculously sickening. But that actually happened in lots of places after the war was horrible. The war was a horrible thing. It's a stain on all of human history. The great, the good wars, right? A stain on humanity. But anyway. Chrissy, you said you think it's cool that these authors' works got people to open their Bibles and consider Christ who might not otherwise crack a Bible, etc., without their prompting. Yeah, I mean, I think that it probably did do that in some ways. I hope it did. I'm sure it did over the years. I mean, just the fact that, you have tons of people that have gotten into things like Lord of the Rings and those books, and regardless of their religious understandings, they wouldn't even see it really until they'd read one of the most incredible fantasy pieces of literature in all of history and been, exposed to that. And then they come back and they're like, who is Tolkien? What did he believe? And then they find out he was a Christian man, right? And all this other stuff. So it's really cool that these men did this. I think their works are some of the most important works of the last century. But, you know, instead of that being touted by mainstream schooling as some of the greatest works of literary history, we have, you know, works by, you know, pedophiles, things like Alice in Wonderland, who was written by Lewis Carroll, who was a straight up pedophile, right? And so then we have our education system pushing that stuff over things like Lord of the Rings or Chronicles of Narnia, which are outstanding pieces of literature, right? So, yeah, there's that too. It's all sad. Patriot, you asked if I got your second question. I don't think I did. You put it on Telegram last night. It's about the red sluice. But you're having to use a code word there. Okay. Maybe I'll check my email in a second. Let me see. Actually, I might have it. Oh, it's not my email. It's in, you said Telegram? Let me check it real quick. See what you said. Oh, the red Jews. I don't know. How about I take that as a study thing, okay? How about I do that? Because I don't know right now. I haven't seen that before. But I'll take that down. Okay. Well, let's see. What's our next topic then, guys? We got one or two more here. I'll try to go quick. Okay. Let's do this one real quick. So this was a question by Chrissy. You asked, who is said to be the bone remnants of the ornamented bone art in the various catacombs, ossuaries, crypts, etc.? It seems grotesque, like it celebrates death. You see IHS themes. Whose bones are these? Let's see here. Let's see. Okay. Bones in catacombs. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's the catacombs of Paris. Like this on your screen now. Like these bones. Just walls and walls of bones and decorate. It looks like it's decorated and it's somehow they... Now, I don't know if it's Christian, but, you know, there are places where they put Christian symbols in, but I don't know if the bones were done by Christians necessarily. I don't know. That's an interesting thing that might be studied. But there's all this stuff, right? So you do wonder, like, who is responsible for these bones? Why did they do this? Why did someone meticulously take eons and eons to just pile the bones in such an ornate fashion? It must have been a sick individual, right? That's what we really kind of think when we see this stuff. But I don't know that I have a good answer for you. See, that's the thing. That's the thing, Chrissy, is I don't know that anyone has a good answer. If you don't believe the narrative of the people that talk about this, you know, the things we have, then I don't know what to tell you because I haven't studied it enough to know anything more or find any real evidence to support any other conclusions. You know, a lot of people will ask questions. You know, this is what made me really mad. A long time ago, the My Lunch Break channel did a video on these catacombs. And his video was full of questions, but he didn't have any answers. He would ask you, were these the bones of the people killed in the great floods or mud flood of what? I mean, that's a question. I don't know what to do with that. It's not evidence of anything. So that's where we are left to come up with what we think. And then if you have a theory, then it is upon you to research it and find evidence for your theory. So I can't give you the answers. You know, I haven't studied this enough to find any of the any evidence. You know, I can't tell you if in this photo right here, if the same person who placed these skulls here was the same one that put this plaque here that has Memento Creatoris tui in diubus juventilus, all of it. I don't know. I don't know what these words translate to. So that to me was like, it would be the things I would study to try to figure this out, right? So that's, I guess, where I have to leave this one today. I don't know the answer to this. Wasn't it that, didn't they say that this had to do with the plague or something like that? Maybe not. What does it say here? Let's just look at what it says here. And, I'm not saying I agree with it. Right here on the Catacombs page. Underground ossuaries, which hold the remains of more than 6 million people. It was, according to this, built to consolidate Paris' ancient stone quarries from the Barrière d'Enfer, meaning the gates of the infernal, meaning the gates of hell, the former city gate. The ossuary was created as part of the effort to eliminate the effects of the city's overflowing cemeteries. Now, I will say this, like, I don't know if you've read a lot about, these time periods we're talking about. This is talking about the 18th century, but I think you can go back further. You can talk about the times of the plague and, the Black Death and all that stuff. If you remember how these cities worked without any place to put dead bodies, especially if lots of people were dying, then what would you have to do to get rid of dead bodies so they didn't cause pestilence? They didn't cause rats, plague, all these things. Well, apparently in Paris, they started burying them in catacombs, right? So that stuff wouldn't be on the streets of their city all the time, causing just refuse and disgusting nastiness, smells, and all of this. So, in a city that's very populated, that's a good way to try to get rid of dead bodies. Now, that's a lot of bodies. If it's 6 million, that's a lot of bodies, right? That's a lot of dead people. But you have to ask yourself, did all this happen in one night? Are you talking about something that happened in one moment of time? Or are you talking about they kept digging catacombs and kept expanding it over time to continuously bury dead people who died in the city for whatever reason? I don't know what's the current death rate in Chicago. What's the current death rate in the city of Chicago? Yes, assist me, AI, please. Current death rate in Chicago. The current, not homicide, you dolt. AI is so stupid sometimes. Not homicide. Overall death rate. Transfer it. Ah. What's the current overall death rate in Chicago? I want you to get a mental picture of what this looks like. Not homicides, you idiot, but all deaths. They probably don't publish death rates very much because they don't want people to know. It's not precisely detailed in sources, but the general context reflects ongoing trends in public health. Chicago's total deaths per 1,000 population is estimated to be around 9.3 per 1,000 death rate. Assuming that death rate, how many die per month? All right, so 2,000 deaths per month in Chicago. All right, 2,000. Now, I would imagine in these previous centuries, Paris is a pretty big city. Now it's huge, right? But I mean, even then it was probably pretty big. I'm not saying they would have this many deaths, but they could have hundreds per month that they have to dispose of. So do they keep building cemeteries in the city when it's already fully populated, or do they go underground and start burying people underground? This is the type of thing that real research is important for, right? You have to do this type of real research to understand the time period and what's going on. So I'm trying to just show you that even based on just overall death rate, right? You've got to take care of a lot of bodies. And then that might factor into the research on what these catacombs are, because the city of Paris was a very large city for centuries. It's not like it just sprung up, at some point or was really small. No, it has been a big city for a long time, right? So I don't know. I think I'll leave that for today then, if that's okay. Let me see if you guys are saying some other stuff about it. Westwind, you say it's really common for these AI YouTube channels to clickbait a title and thumbnail and have AI generate the script with nothing but questions and answers. I can't stand it. Some do that. I'm not blaming any of, even if I mentioned like my lunch break, I'm not sure that he does that. I don't know. But I will say that I was disappointed with his video on this topic. I'll just say that. I think I've mentioned that before. Annie, you ask if the bones have been carbon dated or tested, DNA tested. That's another thing that you should ask and you should find out. That's why, when you're building an evidence case, like I did in my video this week, and I'm sure that turned off a lot of people. I can't ever speak against anything in the truther movement without turning off a lot of people. But in that video, I detailed real evidence. So the problem that I saw when I had comments, I even had some people from that other channel come into mine on that video and make comments against me. Say things against me like I was doing this or I wasn't being fair or I just responded to each of those with, can you please refute some of my evidence with evidence of your own? As far as I know, and I haven't checked it today, nobody ever came back with anything. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, what am I supposed to do if I spend my time, my blood, sweat, and tears putting into an 1.5-hour video that has real, testable, verifiable evidence that Israel and the biblical lands are in the Middle East, like all the evidence says. If I show all the evidence for that, and then I have people come to me and say, oh, I can't stand listening to you. You're a horrible person for saying this. You're just as bad as all the rest. And then I ask, well, did you have some evidence you wanted to share that would refute what I said? And they vanish when I say that. So I can't apologize for that, but in the terms of the catacombs, this is the type of research that should be done. A video about the catacombs should have death rates. It should have, where did they put dead bodies in that time period? It should have, were there any cataclysms that we know of in history around those time periods that could have contributed to that? They should examine all those signs in those catacombs. What do they say? Who is purportedly the people that put them there? The problem is when you go to those videos, you're not going to get that information. You're mostly not going to get that. You're going to get someone that is really interested in making a YouTube channel for themselves that makes them some cash every month, because they might even live on that. And you're going to get someone that really wants you to just be impressed with what they did. Someone that just wants you to be amazed so that you'll come back for the next video. And I'm not, again, calling any specific YouTuber out, but I'm saying, I spent on my video 1.5 hours giving you verifiable facts that you could travel and you could go see yourself. And, you just have to ask yourself, some of these cases, are those YouTubers doing that? Are these other people that are posting things, are they actually giving you something you could go check yourself? Or are they just trying to rile you up, get you excited about something that's really a speculation? I don't know. So I'm just encouraging you to do the research or, just be careful out there. There's a lot of people just trying to do a lot of things. I don't know. It scares me a little bit because of things like, some of the things we talk about. But anyway. All right. There's one more topic, and it is a topic that I hesitate to speak about today. I do hesitate to speak about it. The Epstein Files. Christina Schenk, you asked about this. I'm I want to be careful about these things now. I don't have any intention. I just am tired. I'm very tired of trying to somehow help everybody understand what's happening and make you all feel better about what's going on. I'm sort of tired of the coddling. So I don't want to take any time to try to explain anything to you here, but you asked, what is my view on the Epstein Files? Yesterday, 3.5 million files were dropped. 3.5 more million from the previous drop that was on like January 20th, was it? Something like that, where another 3 million files were dropped. That's in addition to the thousands or maybe millions that were dropped the first time last year. So they are obviously coming out. People are being fired from or leaving their positions either in companies or governments because of it. So I don't know or care what you think about anyone involved. I don't care what you think. The files are continuously coming out. Everything, I believe, will be made apparent in the end. That's really all I want to say about it. I don't want to argue with anybody about who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. But I will say that there's been some people saying this would happen from the beginning. And I'm one of those people. And so far, it looks like it is happening. It's all coming out. So I don't know what else to say. That's it. You asked my opinion. I mean, we literally have files now that are showing that they ate babies. They sacrificed babies. They bred babies for this purpose. They, of course, raped and pillaged these girls. They would take over their underage girls, boys. It looks like they were using their dental office there on Epstein Island to rip the teeth out of small children so that when they raped them from every orifice, that it wouldn't hurt the person who was raping them. Everything is coming out. Everything. Just sit and watch. That's all I got to say. It's hideous. It's the most hideous thing that's ever happened in history. And yes, you've got some people in our government saying, verbally saying, you shouldn't be asking questions about that. But in the background, they're the ones releasing all the files, releasing them. Yes, there are some redactions, but every single time we are learning more. And the public will continue to slowly learn more until they are able to stomach the absolute pile of smoking hot poo that is the Epstein Files. And some of these people in the government, the administration, will be saying the whole time, there's nothing there. You know what that's causing to happen? It's causing everyone to want to look. It's causing everyone, including the people that are in the files. It's causing them to look and be caught by it and have to resign and have to leave their positions of power in countries around the world. If I'm not mistaken, is that Peter Mendelsohn? He's going to be tried in Europe for these crimes. It's all going to happen. You must be patient, and it will happen. Trust God. It will happen. Justice will come. All right. Thank you, Gay Marie. You like the background? Good. Yeah, I got some new graphics and I've been revamping the graphics. I've got that website all straightened out. And then I'm, of course, working on the mobile app. That's going to be in the same vein. I do love the new graphics. And I'm excited about all of it. Really, to be honest, I think it's all good. And I hope people like it. I hope people like it. Thank you for saying that. All right. Well, guys, thank you for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure as always. I've had a blast. Man, Hebrews is so thick and juicy, and we are getting into the meat of it now. It's been so awesome. So I'll be excited to again be with you next week. In the meantime, I'd really like to get another video out very soon, so I am going to be working towards that. I think that the video that I'm most likely to do next is the Simon Magus Doctrine video. I have it mostly written, so it's a matter of recording that, making sure I have the appropriate slides and text on the screen and all that stuff, and editing that down. But I think that can be done pretty soon. Maybe this week, maybe next. We'll see as I have time. And I appreciate all you guys. I appreciate your attention, and I appreciate the fact that most of you are still here after my video this week. I'm sure some people got very upset by that. I don't know what to say to it. I don't know what to say to that. But thank you guys. I will remind you that as Flat Bob mentioned, I want to mention this one more time. Flat Bob mentioned that you could support his family as a church by giving a little money to help them with funeral costs and expenses, things like that. So I would really encourage you as a church body, this is what we are here for. And I'm not telling you you got to, or you're a bad person if you don't, but I feel a strong persuasion to help, and I hope you do too. Let me find those links again. I want to put those one more time, so that you can support Flat Bob's family in a very tangible way. I just think God will bless in this way. So the PayPal is here, and the Cash App link is here, so that you can support our family member, Flat Bob, and his family. Thank you guys so much for your attention today. I'll leave the logo up for just a minute. You can continue to chat for just a minute, and then we'll shut it down. Thank you guys so much. God bless.